Hi, I'm Ger Apeldoorn from Holland, and I'm co-author of Behaving Madly, and this is Mr. Media.
I'm Bob Andelman, and this is a Mr. Media interview. You can see, hear, and read more than 1,000 of my previous celebrity interviews at mrmedia.com. That's mrmedia.com. Subscribe to the show on YouTube, iTunes, Apple News, Google Play, or Stitcher, and follow us on Twitter and Facebook. On today's show, I'll welcome Ger Apeldoorn, co-author with Craig Yo of Behaving Madly, zany, loco, cockeyed, rip-off satire magazines. It collects more than 200 pages of never-before reprinted humor from a generation of short-lived magazines inspired during the 1950s by the original Mad magazine. Stick around. The first letter to the editor that I ever wrote and saw published was to Crazy Magazine, a competitor to Mad, Cracked, and Sick in the mid-1970s. Crazy was a Marvel Comics take on satire, and, being a card-carrying fan of old Marvel, Foom, for those in the know, I took my previous teen love of Mad and crossed over to Stan Lee's new magazine. What I didn't know until a few years later was that Crazy was not Lee's first attempt at satire, well, outside of Not Brand Comics. Back in the 1950s, Lee created and edited Snafu for Red Circle magazines, aka Atlas Marvel. And Snafu, well, I may let my guest tell you what that stood for. According to my guest, Ger Apeldoorn, and his co-author, Craig Yo, who have written a new history of the genre, Behaving Madly, zany, loco, cockeyed, rip-off satire magazines, Lee was planning the first issue of Snafu, even as Bill Gaines, Harvey Kurtzman, and the usual gang of idiots were in production of Mad's second. And Behaving Madly is an irresistible window into a forgotten era of occasionally first-rate, but mostly second and third-rate satires of the 1950s. Apeldoorn and Yo, the latter of whom appeared on Mr. Media to talk about one of his other books, Secret Identity, the Fetish Art of Superman's co-creator Joe Shuster, have crafted a must-read for humor fans of all generations. By the way, you might also want to search the Mr. Media archives for my previous interviews with Mad Magazine contributors Al Jaffe, Arnold Roth, and Sergio Aragones. Ger Apeldoorn, welcome to Mr. Media.
Hi. Hi.
Hi, nice to finally see you. We've been friendly through social media for many years, but this is our first time getting to talk. Did I adequately explain what Behaving Madly is all about, or is there more you'd like to add to that?
No, I think you captured it. I like the fact you say it's a fascinating window into a period of humor. And although I agree that we're talking about second or third or even worst rate material, I think one of the best features of all these magazines is that they were produced so cheaply and so quickly that sometimes a particular writer or artist could slip in something of quality, which was never the intention. You and I agree, but it did get in, and all those things I've selected for the book.
It's like a lot of things in modern culture. I mean, someone will have a hit TV show, and then someone else will do a version of the same theme, or there'll be. I mean, this goes all the way back. There was Superman, so someone ripped it off. Someone we know who ripped it off and did Wonder Man. I mean, there's all the
and of course in the 50s, this 40s and 50s, but 50s particularly, this was just the way publishing was done. I mean, anything that came out of the 50s was a copy of something else. Sometimes it morphed into something new, but Atlas, which you mentioned as the publisher of Snafu, they only did copies of other types of magazines. That was their main business.
Right.
Everyone did.
And a lot of it. Well, of course, there were so many magazines at the time. There was magazines about everything. There were 6 or 8, 10 in the United States, weekly news magazines, and there's. But also a lot of them also did their movie parodies, which of course Mad was certainly the best at. But one of the things that's interesting about this book is that a lot of the artists and creators became huge household names as far as comics and fans of humor go. Will Elder, Jack Kirby shows up.
Yeah.
Who else? Who else did you run across?
If he is in there, a couple of people that are very famous from comics. One of my particular favorites is Russ Heath. He's in there a lot. We could have put even more of him in there. I think almost anything he did in the genre is such a high quality that somewhere in the introduction or article or whatever you want to call it, I say he was friendly with Kurtzman. I met and interviewed Mr. Heath not for this book but some other time. And he told me that they went out to dinner together or had lunch together and stuff. They liked each other's work. In the end, Russ Heath was asked to contribute to Little Annie Fanny, the sexy Playboy satire that Harvey Kurtzman did with Bill Elder. And Russ Heath painted a lot of those, made them shiny and beautiful. And anything he did in this genre makes you wonder why wasn't he asked for Mad? He was such a terrific artist. Mm-hmm. And other names, if you want to have other names in there, Joe Kubert is someone who was at a point in his career that he was between jobs or between companies. And so he did 40 pages of satire material, including the large illustration parody of Walt Disney's nature television shows, which looks gorgeous as anything that Joe Kubert does looks gorgeous, and that as well. So if you want me to go on for half an hour, I can mention them one by one because I love them all. From Don Heck is even in there. I thought to have Forte in there. What's his first name?
Ron?
No. John Forte, which is a minor league comic artist, and Craig said, who wants to buy the book for John Forte? He's such a minor collectible artist, and no one wants to buy the book for him. And my point of view was, he's such a minor collectible artist that anyone who does collect him will want this book because they won't know he did 4 pages of this sort of material as well.
Right. No, I understand what you're saying. But tell me this, what sent you on this path in the first place to research and recover this forgotten era of imitation?
What set me on the path is my eternal love of anything that has to do with Mad. For me, my love of America and my love of American comics. It all started with when I first found Mad when I was about 12. First the regular Mad magazine, and then the pocket reprint books came out, and you could, for the first time, you could see the Bill Elder and Jack Davis, Wallace Wood material from the earliest Mad when it still was a comic. And then when I was 17, I wrote to the Dutch Mad and I said, "May I please translate for you?" Which they allowed me to. When I was a bit older, I translated Marvel's Crazy, a couple of the issues for a Dutch publisher, and I've always, I think I've collected about anything Harvey Kurtzman ever did.
Did you translate that letter to the editor from 14-year-old Bob Andelman in Crazy Magazine?
I did not. No. I thought it was a fake. A name like that, I thought it must have been a fake, but I didn't know they used real letters. So I'm a huge Mad fan, and from that I started to collect anything like it. And then I just discovered the material, and I'm always I'm artistically interested in anything that's either well done or done in a particular way. So I started collecting those, and by that time I'd started writing articles for the Tomorrow's conglomerate. I started writing articles for the Jack Kirby Collector, and then I got in touch with Roy Thomas, I guess, by sending him some illustration work to do, and I suggested to do an article about the Mad comic book imitations, which, as you may know, Mad started out as the first 24 issues were comic book sized, and only then, because of the pressures of the market at that time, they turned to magazine size, and something completely new started. But when they were a comic book, the first year, everyone started imitating those as well. So I did a huge article for it, actually so large that Roy had to clip it in two and use it in two different issues. And then I'd gotten in touch with Greg, and we were talking about maybe doing a book for him. And I suggested to turn my article for Alter Ego, which is where it was published, about the Mad comic book imitations, into a book, because Craig does reprint books, and the article was just a description, actually an annotated list. And so we could do a reprint book of the Mad comic book imitators. But then after working on that for a couple of months, it turned out that Fantagraphics had the same idea, and they were doing the book already, so we had to skip that. And then Craig said, well, there's the magazines. And he was right. So there's a whole separate book about all the Mad magazine imitations. And I just started buying all of them on eBay. And I think I started this book about 5-6 years ago, just getting all the issues, writing the material, finding out background about all the publishers, and all the time in collaboration with Craig, who's a terrific designer and a great mind when it comes to this sort of stuff. So that's how we cobbled it together.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was aware of Snafu. I probably seen one issue of that over time. I knew about things like Humbug because I actually have the volumes that Al Jaffe and Arnold Roth came on to promote. I knew about oddly enough, there was a humor magazine called Trump. I knew about Help. But tell people some of the titles that you talk about in here, because a lot of them, they're very, very obscure.
Yeah, there's to give a bit of an overview for anyone who hasn't read the book yet. There were Mad was turned into a magazine with issue number 25. That was somewhere in late 1954, and then immediately all the other publishers saw that it sold really, really, really well. So they started to do their own version. First you have Snafu, which was done by Stan Lee, who'd also done a couple of Mad comic book magazine imitations, but on those occasions he never wrote them himself. But when he did Snafu, he wrote it from page 1 to the last page, and he put that on the title page as well, because that's the way he is. So he wrote the complete magazine, 3 issues of that. And then all the others started running. So you have Cockeyed and Kaku, you have Lunatical, and Zany and Panic and Crazy and Fooey and Nuts, and I'm probably forgetting even 2. There were so many.
Thimk?
And sorry? Thimk, of course. Thimk. Yeah, Thimk. Craig had me search for a year for the origin of the word Thimk, which appeared somewhere in the 40s, where you had these plaques with the words think on them with an N. And then suddenly someone, as a parody, came out with a plaque with Thimk with an M, which is what you get if you don't think.
Right.
So that's the gag, and they use that as a magazine title. One of the better executed ones, actually. One of the main things of interest for those Mad Magazine imitations, the Mad comic book imitations had been done by comic book companies. They were used to creating comics, and instead of doing a horror comic or a romance comic or a man loves his horse comic, they did parody comics like Mad. In the case of these magazines, it's the magazine publishers that jumped onto the bandwagon. In the promo for this book, I typed everyone and his uncle joined in, which in some cases it was literally anyone and his uncle, or they invented an imprint and they gave the imprint to their uncle, so it seemed like a separate company. But it's big name companies like Fawcett and Charlton, big name company, Harvey, a couple of low rent companies like the ones owned by Adrian Lopez. So you have the more of the girly magazine and men's magazines, when men's magazines still meant climbing mountains, not women with mountains. So you had respectable companies, disrespectable companies, but it was magazine companies that made these imitations, not comic book companies.
So, Ger, what were the best of the imitators?
The absolute best for me is Lunatical. Lunatical was published by a company called White House, which our research found was later bought by someone else, but they were done by Myron Fass. Myron Fass was a comic book artist who liked his girly pictures, and towards the end of the 50s and into the 60s, he started drifting off into sleaze material as a writer, illustrator, and publisher. But in the mid-50s, he was tapped by White House to, I think he was sought by White House to create a magazine, and he got the best talent possible for Lunatical. So he had Joe Kubert, who worked with Bob Bean at that time. He had Lee Elias, who was one of the favorite horror artists at that time for Harvey, and he worked in a Milt Kniff type of style, but he could do humor as well. And you had Mike Sikowski, who later at DC was part of the main team that did the whole Silver Age revival. And who else did you have in Lunatical? Actually, only big names. Bob Siegel, you mentioned, he was as a writer, he was there, and very sharp material. These two issues are among the most expensive to get. They fetch about $60 for a bad copy.
Were there any good detective stories about tracking these magazines down?
If you think hitting eBay about twice a day for 3 years and not falling asleep is a good detective story, then yes. But no, that's it. Just searching and waiting until they come by, and not always buying the most expensive copy.
And were there any magazines that you had heard of, or that Craig, your co-author, had heard of, but that you simply could never find?
Let me sidestep first. There was one issue that was hard to get because it's so collectible. Oh. There's an issue of Crazy Man Crazy, which is later in the 60s you had Marvel's Crazy, but in the 50s you had a title that was called, had several titles, and I we solved this for once and for all by having a list of all the title changes and dates in the book in a separate bit, so you can clip it out and keep it with you, because otherwise you won't be able to follow it. But they changed titles and formats and price and anything. They were called Crazy Man Crazy, and there was one issue in the midst of all this confusion that has a terrific Jack Kirby story in it, which is in the book. As you can see, it opens with it's a movie satire with text and illustrations, and opens with a full page Jack Kirby illustration, terrific illustration. And in the same issue, there's 3 pages of Steve Ditko, which I personally don't find among part of his best work of his career. But we decided to put those in the book just to take the pressure off, so that people won't buy that magazine just to get their hands on that Jack Kirby or Steve Ditko story, because that's what drives the price up for that one particular magazine.
Do you think, now most of the creators from that era are long gone, unfortunately. There's a few that remain, obviously, but most of them are gone. Do you think any of them would have, if they had the opportunity, would have asked you not to reprint their work from that era?
I'm a bit fearful what Ross Heath will say, because he can be quite outspoken. No, I had the fortune to. We live in a great modern age. I have a blog which I've done for the last 10 years daily, showing the best unreprinted material from the 50s, be it comics, newspaper strips, or cartoons. I started clipping and scanning and putting online the great Sunday page that Al Jaffee did, called Tall Tales. He did a newspaper strip called Tall Tales for about 4 or 5 years, and it was on the daily page. It was just one long panel. Nobody did that. That was the way he could sell it. Because this is new, guys. He did a silent gag without words, without text, in a long panel. And then on Sundays, he had 6 of those long panels next to each other, and he called that Tall Tales. And I've got most of them, so I'm scanning them and putting them online. And I decided, I got hold of Mr. Jaffee's email address, so I decided to send him my scans. So, in fact, just in case he didn't have all of them yet. And he appreciated that. He answered me. We've been corresponding. I've visited him with Greg in New York. And then when we did this book, I found 3 pages by Mr. Jaffee for these magazines, which put all 3 of them in the book. Oh. And 2 of those, he said, well, you're right, it does look like my work, but I can't remember it.
Well, he's in his 90s.
He's in his 90s, but we sat down with him. He started talking about the late 40s and his friendship with Fred Oppenheimer, and he kept on for 3 hours, one anecdote after the other. So he's clearly he's of very sound mind. The last time I had contact with him, and the 3rd page, I'm certain is by him. He said, well, there were people who could imitate me, but I fancy myself a great art spotter. So I'm saying there's 3 pages of Al Jaffee in the book.
Very nice. There's, for anyone who's an Al Jaffee fan, just in the last 2 or 3 years, the animator J.J. Settlemeyer did some video with him and went to his studio and interviewed him.
Great.
So you can find that on YouTube. I know that exists.
I have to see that.
Yeah,
it's
very good.
Great, but
he's still very sharp.
And I think it's confirmed that he's going along with the change of Mad, that he's going to be in the new Mad as well. Oh, that's what I heard, at least.
Very good, very good. So I have to ask you about process as we kind of move to wrapping up. You're in Haarlem in the
Yeah,
Netherlands, correct?
yeah,
And your co-author, Craig Yo, is here in the United States.
yes.
How did the collaboration work on this book?
Um, I um, I worked here from Holland. I do all my research here, and there's many things that I'm interested in research that I'm always surprised that I can find stuff that you over there can't find yourselves. But
Well, we're not very bright over here.
that's probably it. Yeah. I worked here. I did all the scanning and cleaning up and stuff, and then Greg forced me to do everything again. So that's about the process. So we had a lot of late night Skype talks where we went over the material, and Craig is holding up his computer to his laptop to the computer so that I can look over Klitsch's shoulder. Klitsch, his wife, she is his hands at the computer. So no, we want to move this there, and no, can you make that smaller? But it's stuff like that.
Okay.
And, a lot of design work, and he as for the contents, I'm very proud that he let me free to write the 40 plus page article, and he did have to rewrite it. He says my American English is too English. I have what you call Britanisms or something like that in my speech, so he had to move stuff around, and so he has. I'm still glad he still likes to do new books with me, despite of the fact that he put a lot of time in this.
Well, I want to ask, since we have this window into your world there in Haarlem, you're wearing a Calvin and Hobbes T-shirt. Is there anything
illegal?
Is there anything at your desk that you'd like to show fans?
Let me. I wanted to show you this because another American artist I'm a big fan of is Will Eisner, and I interviewed him in 1978 together with Dennis Kitchen, who was. I wanted to ask Dennis Kitchen for a quote on the back of the book, which we didn't end up using. I said, well, you get a free copy out of it. He said, I don't want one. I've already ordered it on Amazon. So I was very proud of that.
Dennis is nice that way.
Dennis is nice. When I interviewed Dennis Kitchen and Will Eisner, I asked Will to draw him. He told me in the interview that he was the caveman of comics. And I asked him to draw himself as a caveman. And that's my pride and joy, which no one has ever seen up till now. So
oh, wow.
there you go.
That's great.
Yeah, he was a great. I met him 3 times. I interviewed him in '78. Met him afterwards again in Amsterdam when the Jewish version of the Contract Record was published here in Amsterdam, and then again at the Comic-Con in San Diego. And all the second and third time he recognized me, which is not my doing, but his. And I thought that was just. Great.
He was amazing with names and faces. I never understood how he could. I mean, I knew him in his 80s, and I never understood how he could be so sharp. I'm in my 50s, and I can't remember half the detail that man could in his 80s.
Yeah, I give my kids the neighbor's kid's name, and that's.
Yeah.
And you're Bob, right? Aren't you?
Yeah.
I remember.
That's good. That's good. So, what's next for you before we wrap up? What do you have ahead?
The next, I'm coming to the San Diego Comic Con. We're going to be signing Behaving Madly on Friday from 1 to 2, which I'm told is a top time where there's actually a couple of people walking by the tables.
Okay.
So that's great, and I'm going to try and pitch some of my other projects there. Like I've written a play about Jack Kirby that want to turn into a graphic novel. So in about 2 years, I hope I can make you happy with that.
Very good, very good. Well, folks, listen, you can find Ger Apeldoorn and Craig Yo's new book, Behaving Madly, zany, loco. I love saying this. I don't say it well, but zany, loco, cockeyed, rip-off satire magazines, wherever great books are sold, or you can order it right now at a great price at mrmedia.com, mrmedia.com. If you're watching the show on Mr. Media, probably over there to the right of the screen, underneath the video, you'll see the cover of the book. You can click on it right now and order it directly from Amazon.com. And that's no matter where you are in the Amazon world, you can order it that way. And you have a website you want people to go to?
Of course, I mentioned my blog. If you like good newspaper strips and stuff like that from the 50s, go to the Fabulous 50s, which is at www.allthingsger.blogspot.com.
Very good. And are you on Twitter or Facebook as well?
I am on Facebook, and I only use it for real comic book stuff. So no pictures of bicycles or meals, please.
Okay. All right. Well, my friend Ger Apeldoorn, it's a pleasure to finally see you face to face.
Yeah.
And enjoyed the book. Thank you so much for joining us on Mr. Media today.
Yeah, thank you very much. Hope to see you again.
Same here.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
To believe her, a bad idea to believe her. Turn up the stereo receiver. Turn up the stereo receiver.
Mr. Media is recorded live before a studio audience full of comic book fans who know biting social satire when they see themselves in it, in the new media capital of the world, St. Petersburg, Florida.
Hi, this is Rich Scheidner. And if you've ever wondered what it was like to be a stand-up comedian in the 1980s, I'm going to do you a big favor. Instead of billions of dollars for a time machine, you can just spend $24.95 and buy my new book, Kicking Through the Ashes, My Life as a Stand-Up in the 1980s Comedy Boom. It will save you money and give you thrills. It will take you there. Go to my website, richscheidner.com, go to amazon.com, and buy this book.
How badly was that done?
It's up to your standard.
Oh, that was perfect. I won't do a retake of that then. That was great. And now I have a great outtake for the end, too.